Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm so stoked that you're here. If you've been part of my community for a while, you know that I just got back from a full season fishing for giant black marlin off the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. And do I have a lot of content coming your way on that adventure? But before we get into that, today's episode is going to focus on something a little bit closer to home, a little bit more in season for North America. It is hunting season in December here in Texas, and we have a Texas local on the show today. Jesse Griffiths is a chef, a butcher, a writer, and an educator. He's been featured on the Joe Rogan's podcast, Meat Eater, and many other incredible broadcasts, publications. And the reason why is because he's so insanely knowledgeable about so much of the natural food source we have in Texas. In this episode, we're going to look into what it means to be focusing on sustaining ourselves from nature, from the wild, and we're going to dive into a closer look of what the hog population is like here in North America, primarily in the South, what that looks like, and what we as hunters can do to help mitigate what has become a very serious problem. I know you're going to enjoy this episode, so y'all stay posted, buckle up. It's another one you're not going to want to miss. Welcome to the Katie C. Sawyer podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today we have a super special guest. I've never met him before, but I have been a fan of his work for a long time. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I'm very, very excited to speak with you.
That's so kind to hear. Like I said, I've been a big fan of your work for a long time. You're a chef and a co-owner of Dai Due in Austin, which is a restaurant that focuses on bringing farm to table, sustainable, locally harvested or ethically sourced food to the restaurant. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Awesome.
Yes.
And you guys have been doing that since 2006.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's, part of the slow food movement. We're seeing more and more restaurants out there that are kind of bringing the visitor closer to the food source. But back in 2006, that was not very common. You're also a teacher. You have the Traditional School of Cookery. Did I say that right?
The new School of Traditional Cookery.
I don't know why I know the name of this.
NSTC. I choose difficult names for everything. Trust me. Like Dai Due, New School of Traditional Cookery. I don't make it easy on anybody.
Well, we like it that way. The New School of Traditional Cookery is a really cool program. I'm not going to lie, I've been trying to sign up for it for years. It's not easy to get into because it's amazing, you guys. He takes the customers, the visitors out hunting, teaches them the ins and out of the hunting, but also the harvesting of the animal and the butchering and the preparation, which is so key and not very common in this world. Jesse, you have a very unique approach to food that I find extremely relatable just because it's so clear that to you, food is about the experience. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as to why you've picked this lifestyle and how you developed this passion for really sourcing food and becoming very close to your food source?
Yeah. I guess that it kind of started. I didn't really grow up with a strong appreciation for food or the sourcing. I didn't grow up on a farm or anything, and I did grow up fishing a lot, and so I really appreciated that, and I loved being outside. And then started hunting later in life. But I would probably say that it all kind of kicked off when I started traveling. When I was in my early to mid 20s and seeing other places and how they related to food and how it was very much these beautiful food cultures that were just derived completely from what they were able to source locally. And they would, if you're in Italy or you're in Mexico, you're able to just completely come up with these beautiful food cultures and recipes and traditions based on your resources, your immediate resources. Maybe it might be not a lot of resources, like northern Mexico, where it's a lot of goats and chilies and onions, and it's kind of sparse, but they can still make some really beautiful food. And I was really taken by that, and kind of wanted to explore how that could be done, in the region that I'm from, that I'm native to, which would be Central and North Texas. Um, and in doing so, I think that hunting and fishing is just a very natural avenue to come by those ingredients, and it's also a very traditional and cultural part of it. And foraging. I mean, I get just as excited about picking berries as I do going fishing. So it's like I think there's all kinds of aspects to it. You can have some chickens in your backyard, or I've got some tomatoes and peppers going right now that I go look at every day. I'm very excited about that. I love the process, no matter what it is. I mean, if it rains and there's a bunch of snails that come out, I'm like, well, having snails for dinner in a week. But it's like I love that connectivity, and I love the idea of having to kind of be wily about it and use what resources you have. And I'm lucky enough to be able to kind of base an entire career on that, and have a restaurant that's dedicated to it, that people are still interested in, even though it's one of the oldest ideas in the world, if not the second oldest idea in the world. And so it's fun, and we still get to explore a lot with ingredients and techniques, and it never ends. It's like, as they say, the morning after the best meal you've ever had, you're still hungry.
Yeah, yes, 100%. I find that relatable. I think that it's really interesting that you mentioned how it's one of the oldest practices in human history. And it's gotten to the point where it's very difficult for us in a lot of ways, like whether that just be a mental hurdle or not. And the fact that at your restaurant, you have both a butcher shop and a restaurant, and also cookbooks to help. You're not only bringing the food to the table, you're opening opportunities for other people to learn how to bring the food to the table. Everything I know about harvesting, like the post-harvest care of animals and my meat, is I've learned from your guidebooks, your cookbooks. I actually have a very specific memory. I didn't get into hunting until my adult life as well. And I think I was 24 years old when I was given the A field. Am I saying it right? Or is it a field?
A field, yeah.
A field. Well,
Yeah.
I've
See,
been saying,
I did it again.
oops. So the field cookbook, which goes over, you guys, like I pluck every single one of my doves now, and I save all of the innards, and I make a delicious terrine. I follow your goose recipe. I think it's a goose terrine, and it's so well loved by everyone in my friend and family group. But I have a specific memory of back before Hurricane Harvey, we had a wet dock that had a fish cleaning table and kind of like a suspended dock over behind it. And my husband had shot a pig at a ranch, and we haven't had a lot of access to land to shoot bigger animals like pigs and deer. And so this was his first pig. It was a big deal. And I had the cookbook open with a spotlight. This is my spotlight, with the spotlight, and pointing to him like, okay, now you put your knife here, and you slice this, and that way we're going to get pork chops from this wild boar. And we were just so excited, and we put all this time into it. And I've learned so much from your guidebooks, and it really enlisted a passion in me. And so I just think it's so cool that you've done this. So whether or not you can sign up for the classes, you still, I mean, everyone has access to your books. And I think that that's really incredible. And you also have in Austin, I saw you have like a membership offer to have a box of the month, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called Table 22, and they deal with a lot of different restaurants, a lot of very high quality places all over the country. They distribute basically these subscription boxes from them, and so we just use that. It's a really good platform to just like distribute things. once a month, just like a cool curated box. I think next month we've got some really interesting grass-fed beef, which is a kind of a new passion of mine. It's just like trying to extract the best beef in the world, like from our region. And then so we'll have that, and things like berry jam, which is we're coming off of berry season. And so our pastry chef Tiffany, she went and made this just exquisite batch of mixed berry jam, and there'll be some breads and Filipino longanisa sausage in there, and it's a good way for us to get excited about certain things from the season, box it up, and then it's shipped to your door. And
Yeah,
it's
that
pretty
is
cool.
so cool. Now we are recording this episode in July. It's probably going to air October, November, most
Okay.
likely.
Yeah.
But you guys, whatever it is, definitely check it out if that interests you, because you also have Texas sourced wines as an option as well, correct?
Yeah, that was a big thing for me in the beginning, and we got a lot of flack about that because, I mean, in my mind, you can't have a restaurant like ours and then source wine from all over the world. It doesn't make any sense because, I mean, looking at these places that really inspire me, like the south of France or Italy or Spain, or I mean, even Baja California, where they
Yes.
grow incredible wine or grow grapes. I mean, they're producing incredible wines that go with the food. And at the time, when we opened the restaurant, which was right at 10 years ago, we're about to come up on our 10-year anniversary next
Wow.
month. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. It was kind of contentious. We had to make a choice. Are we going to do this? And I will be very frank. At the time, the wines weren't as good as they are now. They've really developed, but I was very firm about it. It's like we're gonna stand by this industry, and I kind of liken it to a child. Like you know you can ignore it and tell it it's never going to amount to anything, or you can support it and then watch it blossom. And that's what happened. And I'm not taking credit for the Texas wine industry. I want to go on the record about I did this. No,
I
no,
blossomed it.
but we have stood by them
Yeah.
relentlessly, and I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the strides they've made towards becoming a world class wine producing region, I think. And I think that our wines go best with our food. And it's like when you go to these other places, you want to drink their wines with their food. And I think that when people come to Texas, you should drink our wine with our food. And that's what our restaurant offers. So yeah, I'm very happy about that program. And it's like I said, it's just getting better and better and better. And now it's like, I kind of jokingly, but also honestly like to say we do have the best Texas wine list in the world.
That's cool. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Right. I
But
mean, kind of by default too. I mean, there's a little bit of like, well, you've got one of the only ones, dude. So it's like, yeah, well, I mean, so
still true. It still counts. No,
still
that's so
counts.
cool. I think that there's something very there's a very key thing to be said about the fact that you've stood true to yourself in developing this restaurant and your menu, which changes with the seasons, and the drinks that you offer. I think I just think the whole concept is so awesome, because you mentioned Mexico and Italy. And I think that that's also interesting because those are two there's very unique differences between the fact, for example, in Mexico, they have a certain menu available because that is what is available. If you're going to talk about northern Mexico, that is what they have at their fingertips. Whereas in Italy, it's a little bit more accessible. You can get products from other places, other zones. They're much more connected in the global market than a lot of places in northern Mexico, but they still choose to focus on local farm to table cuisine in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's some sort of authenticity to that obviously at some point Italy was in the same place that northern Mexico is in terms of being able to source products. And the fact that it's just become a cultural tradition, or it remained a cultural tradition for so long, people go from all over the world talk about, the cuisine of Italy and how good the food is over there. And I just really respect the fact that you've taken that and brought it specifically to Texas, because we have a very unique food source here in Texas. And I don't know much about it. I still go to the grocery store and I'm like, wait, okay, what is in season and what's not in season? And I wish that there was a section that said in season, but unfortunately there's not. But can you tell us a little bit about how the Texas palate varies from other parts of the world and what makes it so unique?
Definitely. And I mean, I think your points about Italy and Mexico and the traditions are really good. And when you reflect on that, you realize that Texas is unencumbered, or was unencumbered, by those traditions. Like, we have a bunch of people that have moved here and brought their traditions and brought their ideas and their techniques, and also their ingredients. But a real regional cuisine that's been rooted in centuries of history didn't exist here. I mean, we have some traditions, like barbecue. We have some really distinct food cultures that have settled here, like Germans,
Yeah.
Czech, Vietnamese, of course, the influence of Mexico, Cajun influences coming in from the East, lots of amazing, like, Black influences. And I mean, Texas it is this incredible, for lack of a better term, the melting pot of cultures.
Yeah.
But we, being such a new uh, uh, group culture, we had never really defined what our food was, compared to, Baja California or northern Mexico or northern Italy versus southern Italy, where the food is
Yeah.
drastically different. I mean, subtly different. Maybe, you've got risotto up here and you've got pasta down there and you've got,
Depending on who
you
you
know,
are and what your knowledge is.
sure. But and so that enabled us to kind of just look at it as with a complete blank slate and say, hey, these are the ingredients we have. And, because we exist in the world now, when we have all the technology and the sharing of knowledge and all these other things, we're able to use any idea that we can and apply it to these ingredients, but especially focusing on the aforementioned groups that have kind of made Texas home, which I think is what makes this place so incredible. Just like the Vietnamese influence alone, from the very late 70s and the 80s, when you had a lot of people come and settle here, especially along the coast, and they brought one of the most vibrant and beautiful cuisines in the world. And then we just kind of shook that up with a little bit of Mexican influence, which is, I mean, arguably one of the top cuisines in the world also.
Mm-hmm.
And then things like German techniques, which is smoking meats and game and things like that. You have this very incredible palette of ideas, I think. And then you just take that and then you apply your ingredients to it. So, I like to think of a good example of it, but, you can, we're right now we're making something called pompanado. We made that word up, by the way. I just sent it hard word to pronounce too. Look what I've done again.
You've done it again, Jesse.
Yeah. So in Italy, they make a sauce out of tuna, and it's called tonnato. But we can get beautiful tuna here. I'm sure you know all about that.
Yeah.
Um, but we don't have any right now. But what we were able to source was a big African pompano out of the Gulf. And so instead of
Nice.
using tuna, we just applied that technique to this big pompano. We salted it and then made this sauce out of that pompano. And so it's just like we're taking an idea and applying it to an ingredient. And we do it all the time. We can ferment anything. We're taking an idea for kimchi, but applying that to Texan ingredients. We're making miso out of hominy, which is nixtamalized corn from Mexico. But then we're turning that into a miso, and it's just so much fun to be confined by your ingredients rather than having this just this surplus of whatever you want. And we're so used to that as a culture. That's kind of our food culture. It's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Whatever you want, whenever you want it. I want asparagus. Well, sir, it's November. I don't care. I want asparagus,
Mhm.
and you can get it. And like, but functioning with what you have instead is, some people are like, well, is that just terribly hard? I'm like, it's actually a lot easier. It's less confining, it's almost, it frees you up to just look at the ingredients. And then once you get into the routine of it and the seasons and how they flow and you get excited, I start bugging the purveyors like, hey, the blueberries here yet? It's about apples. I know they're like, yeah, dude, 3 more days. How did, like, just be calm. I'm like, well, I just know they're coming. They should be here. I've had a nice rainy summer. Um, it's been a beautiful summer here, by the way.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh God, Texas is rough, but it's been a really good one. But conversely, we have like just tons of fruit right now. It's been a really beautiful year, so we can get excited about that. We've got Mexican plums, we've got wild persimmons, apples are about to be here. Pears are doing great. Great peach season. All the grape growers are beside themselves with how good it's been. Just gentle rains and, nice, not super hot temperatures. It's not like 110 here right now and humid. We're all celebrating because it's 92 and humid.
Feels
And it's
so
like, oh,
good.
it's fall, basically. Yeah. So
It is harsh.
it's easy to get excited about these things. And it makes it so much fun. And it just seems very real to celebrate these ingredients, and each and every one of them, and the feral hogs will probably start to look really good to come this fall because of all the grass. We're going to have an excellent fawn crop. So deer hunting is going to be excellent in 2 or 3 years. We're planting deer seeds right now. Turkeys are thriving because we've had gentle spring and summer rains. So the grass grows up, protects them from predation. And it's just so much fun to watch all these cycles happen and then just to utilize those resources and then be attuned to them. And I have to admit, I totally forgot what your question was. I just started
No, you're
rambling.
good. No, you're good. I loved it. That was amazing. I just think I'm so captivated by the fact that it's like, for me, I'm still like very, focusing on the season, and I'll have like a harvest and I'll eat off of it for, the next 9 to 12 months. But what I really liked about what you were just talking about was the fact that you're analyzing how things have been over the course of the last few weeks and last few months, and already preparing for what you're going to get as a result in the fall, in the spring, and in several years from now. I think that that's something that's it's so primal for us. It's such a deep rooted nature for humans, and we've become so disconnected from that. And I really liked that you said sourcing food like this just feels very real. Um, can you expand on that a little bit more? Like, I could nerd out over all your thoughts on how the game's going to react to the summer rains, to the spring we had, and all of that. But I'd really like to, before we get into wild game, I'd like to talk about this need to link ourselves to our food that a lot of people have become disconnected with.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that it can also promote stewardship in a way too. Like when you don't necessarily, as a consumer, equate gentle rains with happy farmers, and we should, maybe your baseball game got rained out, but at the same time, this is great. If it's, we're in a very volatile region. Central Texas, it's like usually we have a drought and then it doesn't rain like a nice little like sprinkle. It usually floods right after that.
Right.
And then we just have torrential rains for 2 weeks and it wipes out Houston. And so it's like, oh God, we're
It's
doing
not
this
funny,
again.
but yes,
No, but I mean,
it's true.
we're seeing these things happen. But to tie everything together, like temperature and rainfall and or just like how many young farmers are starting farms? Like these are all issues that we should be thinking of, on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. It's all linked, and everybody has to eat every day. And so if we can kind of bridge that gap for people and just show them, if they come to the table and they're like, hey, well, we've got these beautiful grass-fed steaks, we're really happy about this one in particular. And people, would say, oh, well, I thought that it's always the same, because they're so used to consistency. And we'll be like, no, this is the time to celebrate this animal because it was able to eat so much grass. It's put on some really good fat. Now's the time. We can't guarantee that it's going to look as good, in October, if the rest of the summer is really dry, and so, if we can kind of bridge that gap for people and show them that in its natural state, food food is very reliant on all these factors that we kind of take for granted. And when it's really good, it's good, and it's time to celebrate. And if it's not, then we have to also figure out either how do we utilize this resource, or how do we make it better. There's a good example would be eating freshwater fish. And a lot of people are a little resistant to it because we've polluted a lot of our freshwater rivers and lakes. They're probably not the best source of food. And so I think that we should be eating it. And people are, like, not all rivers in Texas. Obviously, there's a lot of very high quality fish coming out of freshwater in Texas, but there's some, like say around Dallas Fort Worth area, that would be a little like, this is pretty close
Questionable.
to a
Hmm.
major metropolitan area. I mean, one time I went and served a bunch of people at a very expensive dinner. I served them fish out of one of these rivers purposely, and they were all like they were kind of like trash fish, like fish that people wouldn't normally eat anyway. And my point is like, these are your fish. Like these are the fish, you're 4 or 5 hours from the coast. It's you'd have to make a pretty good argument that those are your fish because it's pretty far away. And so as a resource, these are your fish. And so if you're a little upset or resistant to eating out this resource from this location, then you should steward that location a little better. Like we should start thinking about that as a culture, as a
Hmm.
society. Like be like, oh, well, we have these fish here. Maybe we should take a little bit better care of the water they live in. So I think that helping people with that connectivity, maybe not so much in a negative lesson, like that, but just like,
But
I'm not
seriously,
like, yeah,
hmm
like slapping people, rolling up a newspaper, slapping them on the
eat your
nose
fish.
with it. Yeah, like, but if you can help people understand the connection,
Yeah.
then they'll start to take care of that resource a little better.
I think that that's beautifully said. There's something to be said with people of all ages getting to see and experience, especially when you're looking at metropolitan areas where it's become very easy to be disconnected from your food. But to get to see and experience, where food comes from, as well as the process of collecting that food and harvesting and the whole thing just makes you so, like, for example, I used to just buy chicken thighs. Like all I wanted was chicken thighs. I don't want the breast. I don't really want the legs. I just want the thighs. And that's fine. I can go do that. I can go buy a chicken thigh every time I want to go buy a chicken thigh. But now I harvest my meat seasonally and I eat every part of that animal because that's what I got. And now I'm not like, I'm just going to have chicken thighs for the rest of the week. No, I'm going to have the neck. I'm going to make a nosabuco, and then I'm going to have some tenderloin. And then next week I'm going to prepare heart because my husband's coming home and it's a special meal for us, And it's just like, I think that integrating the full concept of these animals and your harvest as a whole, whether it be produce or meat, is really important and something that a lot of people haven't really gotten exposed to in today's day and age. Now, I want to jump in. You mentioned how, the hogs and the turkeys and the deer are going to be developing in a certain way because of the summer season we have had. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Definitely. We've had these rains, which are not common, haven't been common the past few years. We've been kind of going through a drought cycle, and so it's just exceptionally helpful when we have these, right, because they provide cover and food, which are the two things that these animals need the most. And so also we're about to see like a really good crop of acorns, pecans, things like that. The other things that they eat, which are not happening right now but will happen in the fall.
Okay.
So right now there's a lot of food on the ground, there's a lot of cover, and then soon, when it really counts, before winter, all these trees are going to drop these, probably I would say, the most important foods, the high protein tree mass, which in Texas is the acorn mostly, because we have a suite of oaks here. I don't know how many, probably 10 or 15 different major species of oaks here. So
Wow, I had no
it's,
idea.
yeah, it's a, I mean, depending on the region,
Right,
like
right, right, right.
where
Throughout
we're at,
Texas.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, central and north and East Texas to an extent, you'll see a lot of oaks. And those animals really rely on those acorns. And then, of course, the state tree is the pecan. And so we also are about to, it looks like, just from my neighborhood, there's pecans growing everywhere here. It looks like we're about to have a very bountiful pecan crop, which also benefits these animals. And so, we can fast forward to January and February of next year and probably forecast some very exceptional hogs, and by that I mean dead hogs, that are going to have a lot of fat on them, like the kind that we want, and
Yeah.
healthy deer. It's like I like deer herds to be bountiful and healthy. I love happy deer, and I think we're about to have some. And we've seen lots of beautiful little fawns out there. We saw some triplets the other day, which is,
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
anecdotal, but it's still like, it just gives you so much hope. Like, it's pretty rare to see triplets. And we saw three tiny spotted fawns sleeping in the grass. And I asked a biologist, I was like, do you think those were triplets? And he was like, if they were together, they probably were. And that's pretty cool. And so that's just like, when you're planting a bunch of carrot seeds and they all pop up and are looking bountiful. And so it's pretty exciting. I mean, and it'll get dire. Trust me. It's
Yeah.
Texas. It's going to get bad again. I might even eat my words here, and we might just go into a drought cycle, and
Oh,
we might
no.
have 100 days over 100. But it's like taking those wins, and hopefully we'll have a great crop of hogs and deer. And we're on probably our third or fourth year in a row of kind of excellent turkey uh, circumstances. It's like the turkeys are thriving here right now, which isn't the case all over the country. There's places where they're really struggling. Their populations are more vulnerable, and so you'll kind of see these ebbs and flows a lot. But right now Texas is great for turkeys, and that's coming from the state turkey biologist, Jason Harden. And he told me the other day, he was like, yeah, it's looking great. And you never get state biologists tell you things are good. Never. They're like the most pessimistic people
Oh,
out there. And so I was just like, are you serious? Did you just say that? Like, it's like, yeah, things are bad, things are real bad, but he's
man.
like, it's great. And then we've had yet another good year. And so for me, I mean, I'm obviously very interested in turkeys, very interested in hogs, wrote a book about each one of those things. And I just love to see that, especially the turkeys, because I mean, the hogs, I mean, I wrote a book about hogs in order so we could kind of eradicate them. But turkeys, I wrote a book about them. I'm like, well, don't eat them all by any
We
means.
love the turkeys. The
We
turkeys
love
are from
turkeys.
here.
Yeah, we love seeing turkeys, and poults. Baby turkeys. They have, it's a tough world out there for them. They have a very slim chance of survival. Like, 1 in 10, 2 in 10
Wow.
might make
I
it to
had no
maturity.
idea.
That's kind of a
Yeah, what are some of
generalized.
What are some of the like biggest threats to turkeys? Because, like you
Everything.
said, everything.
Everything.
Well, that
Yeah.
stinks.
I mean, in the nest, as an egg, it's raccoons and skunks and possums and feral hogs and snakes, caracaras and vultures and crows, owls, coyotes, foxes and bobcats. And let's throw in mountain lions on the nest, or a mower, like if they've
Yeah.
nested in the side of a field and they, somebody comes by and, that can happen too. And then as poults and adults, all of those things, but then you start to get more into things like, predators, owls, coyotes, foxes, bobcats, and then people. But that's at least regulated, and things are looking pretty good for turkeys right here. But we're also it's a private land state, and so that really helps with
Yeah.
fostering turkeys. That's one of the benefits for having a lot of private land. I mean, there's a lot of, you could talk for hours about public versus private land, but at the end of the day, there's big ranches that can hold a lot of turkeys and then receive relatively light pressure on them versus a public situation there. So
Yeah.
that does help.
Just, can you give us just like a brief expansion on that?
Okay. Well, it's a private land state, like 96, 97% privately owned. And then that remaining percentage, I mean, from a hunting perspective, it's going to be a fraction of that. I don't know the actual number, but I'm gonna throw a number out. I make an estimate. Is we probably have between 50 and 100 public land turkey tags available every year in this state.
Wow.
This
Yeah,
is
I've never drawn
nothing.
one.
Yeah, I haven't either. It's like, I mean, but there's a ton of turkey hunting, but it's all
Yeah.
going to be on private land. So, yeah, there's the public hunting opportunities here are slim. We've adapted in a lot of ways where there's a lot of programs that are coming out now that are trying to get new hunters, novice hunters, interested people that have never had that experience, to get them onto the private land. And I think that we're going to see nothing but an expansion upon that idea, which is something that I find really exciting, is
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
an interplay between the private landowner, who is hopefully a steward of their land and is looking at that land from their great grandchildren's perspective, but at the same time maybe trading work with interested hunters that don't have access to it, controlling that access, but then, like sharing it, but at the same time stewarding it. I think that, I mean, public land hunters might scoff at what I just said and be like, well, that's not a great idea. And my point being is like, well, it's the kind of the best thing that's going to happen here, is that, I mean, the private land's not going away. And so how do we best utilize this situation and get interested hunters out there engaged in hunting, engaged in conservation, responsible gun ownership, and et cetera. And in this extremely unique situation that is Texas, there's not another state like it from this perspective. Um, I think that that's probably, going to be the best avenue for us to explore, is trying to get people onto land so they can experience it and see how these resources interact and how they can interact with those resources. And it's going to require some giving landowners and some dedicated people that are willing to go out there and maybe work or do whatever it is to kind of have that access. But I think that's the kind of the exciting option right now for that.
For sure. I mean, it brings us back to the fish conversation in Dallas, where we want people to connect to nature and their food source. And with Texas being such a private land state, that just helping facilitate these opportunities is going to be very key in the growth and the long-term conservation of our state and North
Mm-hmm.
America as a whole. And for the big picture. But what are some programs, are they in the works? Or I think you mentioned that there's some coming our way where we're going to see a little bit more facilitation between private land owners and new hunters?
Definitely. I think the Texas Wildlife Association's Adult Learn to Hunt program is probably the best, and probably one of the best in the country, if not the best. It is an
That's
exceptional
cool.
program. And TWA is a private landowners advocacy group, but they're also dedicated to bringing new hunters out. And this program is expanding very rapidly. Matt Hughes is in charge of it, and he does an exceptional job. And we've worked together a lot. He's guided for me for a couple years. I've worked with TWA in tandem, and I really see that program as being kind of the model. And if they can just expand, it could be exponential from where they're at right now. And they are getting new hunters out in the field and people that don't have land. I don't have land, you know. I mean, I'm lucky that I
I don't
have,
have land.
yeah,
A
but
house.
also I buy tons and tons of meat from people, from ranchers, and so that's always given me this. I mean, be really honest. It's given me a great advantage, you know, because like when you spend so much money on meat with a rancher, a lot of times they're like, hell yeah, you can come out here and hunt. So I've been
Yeah.
very,
We're
very
happy to
lucky.
see you.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but
That's
you know,
really cool.
I think of people that don't have that access and they're interested in hunting. You know, I think that many of us are deep down are very curious about it. You know, and we can get very philosophical about that, but it's true. A lot of people are very interested, or they know, and might not even know it. And introducing them to hunting, I think, is a very eye-opening experience. And then you'll have some people say, well, we can't accommodate that many hunters. And I'm not going to argue with that. But I will also say that I don't think that every time you take a new hunter out hunting, they become a lifelong hunter. Many times they don't. They do it once, they do it twice. And that's not the worst thing in the world. And because what you've done is you've introduced them to the idea of what it's all about. They probably had maybe a misguided opinion about hunting at some point in their life, about what it actually is. And now they see it and they've got an enlightened perspective because now they've done it. And then from there on out, when you go to the grocery store and you see the chicken thighs, you might still buy the chicken thighs. That's great. But you will also regard them as being a former animal because you've gone through that process. And so to me, if they go out one time and they see the entire process, they might not even kill something, but they might participate as a group and see it. That's a complete win right there because you've shown them what it is to take a resource, and then you can go back and apply that to anything. I mean, to a
Yeah.
carrot, to the gas in your car, to to
Yeah.
the clothes you wear. You know, it's all about resources. And I think that hunting is a direct line to admiring and appreciating resources.
Yes. You've shown them exactly. You've shown them what it is to take a resource as well as respect the resource
Hmm,
and, the work that's put into it and what it gives you.
certainly.
Um, I think I want to get into the Hog book, which is a really special book. And I think this is a really natural integration into that because we're talking about private land in Texas and we're talking about how, there's lots of opportunities out there, potential opportunities out there. And it's not specific to Texas, but it's very big in Texas, but it's pretty specific to the south of North America. We have this hog population. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that hogs are actually invasive animals. They're not native to North America. And I guess before we get into the conversation, are there any swine that are native to North America? Like, for example, we have the javelinas in South Texas. Are they technically swine?
They're not.
No.
Yeah, they're not. They're not technically in the swine family or the Suidae family, or maybe that's the genus. I can't quite remember right now, but they're not. They're not related to pigs. A lot of people mistake them for maybe a native pig or something, but pigs were introduced here from Europe in the 1500s, and then of course thrived. And now half the population of feral pigs, which are the same as domestic pigs, they just don't have an address. They just, and once a domestic hog escapes, it's immediately a feral hog. And I would even argue that once a feral hog is trapped and kept for a couple weeks, then it's domestic hog. It's like, because that's
Don't
how
they
it
go
worked.
through physiological changes?
They do. They do. A domestic hog, if it escapes, they can experience an elongation of their snout. Their tusks will get sharper. And these are to enable them to forage more effectively because they are rooting animals. So they dig and root with their noses, and they will become more bristly. Their hides will develop a little bit more, and that's just to protect them from the weather. And it's pretty fascinating that they can do that. They're
How
very
over
resilient.
the course of how much time is this change?
Weeks. Yeah,
That's insane.
it is. It is. Well, that adaptability really speaks to how they've become such an issue, is because they're very intelligent, very adaptable to many different regions. I think that in our lifetimes, we're going to see some feral hog populations in mountains, maybe in the West.
Oh my
Maybe
gosh.
I think that we're going to start to really see this spread, because they can live anywhere. They live in Germany, they live in Russia, Russian boars. It's very cold there, and for some reason we think that the mountain states are immune to it. But uh, I don't want it to happen, but I'm just kind of curious to hear that story about that elk hunter in Montana who's just like, what
What
is
is
that?
that?
And it's just going to be, and it might be an escaped hog, but that's how it starts. That's how it started. When the pigs were first introduced to the southeast part of the United States, and they just started to spread, but they were released. That was the European way, is to kind of have this semi-feral, semi-domestic animal that was kind of released into the forest so that it could feed on acorns and whatever else. And then when it came
Be a
time to
reliable food source.
exactly when it came time to pick the fruit, they could circle back to it and know vaguely where it was, and that's how this all started. And so Texas has half the population of feral hogs in the United States,
Oh my
and
gosh.
a lot of that is, in my mind, because of our private land situation too, in that we have somewhat of an incubator, and we have these big ranches that just can sustain populations of hogs. It gives them a lot of places to hide too. So and
Yeah.
also things like deer feeders. We feed a lot of corn here, and so they definitely enjoy that. um, and there's, and then just the topography and the geography of this state. Lots of waterways, lots of wooded areas, lots of scrubby areas, and where they can just hunker down and hide and make more pigs, and that's what they're doing. And so, the hog book was just kind of, it was so different from the turkey book, in that it was just like a textbook on kind of culinary eradication, I guess. Like, can we eat our way out of this problem? And the answer is no, we can't. But the resources here, how do we best utilize that? And so that's,
Yeah.
kind of
I
the
mean,
impetus for writing it.
I think a lot of people, if they're around private landowners, they recognize that these pigs are a severe problem, because there's so much damage that's being done by these pigs, whether it be damage to roads, fields, or even taking from the native wildlife as food
Mm-hmm.
sources and ecosystems. But what a lot of people seem to not realize, and this is kind of like one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast, is there seems to be like a mythology around pigs, especially in the community in Texas. I haven't been around a lot of other communities of hunters, but this concept that pigs aren't good to eat, and they're dirty, and they're like, it's not like we just kill them and because they're a problem, and that's just what we're going to do. But what your book focuses on is, I like culinary eradication, is, breaking down the fact that actually, no, these pigs are absolutely delicious. I can prove this to you in an entire book of recipes. And the fact that you break it down on different pig size I think is really, really cool and really vital information, as well as brining and the caring and the butchering of the animal. But I'm sure that you've heard and had so many conversations about, this mindset, especially in Texas, of these pigs being bad and not actually being good to consume. Can you expand on that, like, mindset a little bit and the conversation that's around it?
Yes. I mean, I think I like to tell people that that book was really a compilation of answers to these questions. So over the years, we would do a class or have an interaction with a hunter or be hunting or whatever it was. And then a question would come up about pigs. I mean, let's distill it down to the most basic question: are they edible? Answer: yes, definitely, they're edible.
Delicious.
And then maybe let's another question: what's your favorite recipe for a pig? And I would be like, well, how big is this pig? What are we talking about? Are we talking about a 7 pound piglet? Are we talking about a 300 pound boar? Because I don't have one effective recipe that's going to cover both of those animals. And so from that, I was like, oh, and so then you say, well, what's the best way to convey that information simply and effectively and efficiently to these people that are curious about it? And it's like, oh, well, you're going to break it down into size. And like, well, what is the size? Is it small, medium, large? And like, well, that doesn't really work, because you could get a big sow that's got a lot of fat on her and it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
then you get a big boar, it's kind of stinky. And I was like, oh, well, we need to branch that out too. So then it was, okay, it's a small pig, it's a medium pig, it's a big sow, it's a big boar. And I didn't really want to go beyond that, because like, let's just keep it simple right there. That's very approachable. You can go out and hunt and shoot a pig out of a sounder, and then you walk up, and what I would love is for the person to look at it and be like, that's a medium hog. I know which chapter to go to.
Yeah,
And it's like, that's what I wanted to do. It's a textbook, it's a guide.
it
And I'm
is.
going to be really clear too, that I understand that if you're a farmer and you have a sounder of pigs coming into your field and you just planted it, and you go out there and you shoot 9 of them, the expectation for me is not that you break all 9 of those animals down, and you're not going to get any kind of guilt trip. You can drag those off to the gut pile. I get it. This book was not written for that. This book was written for people that were curious about it. Like, if you have a dead pig in front of you, and we've established, yes, you can eat them. They can be anywhere from good to sublime.
Mm.
If we've established that, if we can agree upon that, and then now you've got a dead pig in front of you, then this book is for you. Any biologist will tell you, we are not going to, the Parks and Wildlife loves to say, we're not going to barbecue our way out of this situation. And I
No.
completely agree, but that's not it. I'm talking about, my job comes in when the pig's dead. If you got
Yeah.
a dead pig in front of you, then all of a sudden it is a potential resource. And if you are interested in that potential resource, then I wrote that entire book from that mindset. And then at every class, every interaction that I had, when somebody asked a question about it, like, oh, hey, can you scald and scrape a hog? I'd be like, well, you can kind of. So I'm like, well, that's going in the book. You're like, what's the best shot placement? You shoot them
Yeah.
right behind the ear? Well, yeah, you can. But then there's also, let's look at it from a physiological standpoint. Let's like actually look at, where the heart and the lung and the spine on a pig is, and let's draw it for you, just so that we can better understand that.
It's
Well,
such a cool book. It
thank
really
you.
is.
I appreciate
And
that.
but I feel like you don't, you're not even doing it justice, because like it's even more than that. You're talking about the hunt. You're talking, and you're an excellent writer. I really
Oh,
enjoy
thank you.
reading your books. They're fun. They're interactive. They often make me giggle. And I think that there's, I think it's really cool that you break down. For me, it's like a conversation for the novice hunter, but also a seasoned hunter that might be novice to the world of culinary pigs. So I think there's a lot of information there that could benefit anybody in any type of where they are in their hunting journey. But the fact that you break down like the kill kit, the hunting kit, what you're going to need, the kitchen kit, like your ideal seasonings to keep on stock for this entire recipe book. I mean, that's such a huge help for a new hunter gatherer cook. I just think it's amazing. And every single recipe I've made from your books has been just well loved by everybody I've fed them to.
That's
And
great.
I just think you've done an incredible job with it and answering all the millions of questions. It shows. And you say that in the introduction. I think that this is just an answer to everybody's question. But let's talk a little bit, because I didn't actually preface this conversation with this information. You mentioned how, like, if a farmer plants a field and then 9 pigs show up and you shoot all 9 pigs, like, you're not going to expect every pig to get eaten. You don't expect that. Why is it necessary to shoot all 9 pigs? Like, kind of lay the land for our listeners a little bit that might not understand the gestation period of these animals, and like why it has become such a problem, and the like rate of growth, which is also another really cool thing that you outline in the book.
Yeah, I mean, they're prolific breeders. 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days is the gestation. They can reach sexual maturity very early, 5 or 6 months sometimes. And so, I mean, just doing the math, and the litter size can be anywhere from, say 4 to 12. That's, just kind of ballparking it. So, I mean, run those numbers, and then you can have a pretty serious problem within a few years. I think more to the point of where you said, like, why do we shoot all of them? Is that, and I can give you some anecdotal information here about how in my brief career as someone that goes out and hunts and utilizes pigs, I have seen the pigs develop with us. Like, I've watched the hog population as a whole, or let's call it the hog population in Texas, has developed and, let's, for lack of a better term, gotten smarter about it. There used to be a style of trap, which is a little box trap about 5 feet wide, maybe 8 feet long. And they were a very simple trap. They would go in, they would trip a wire, the door would slam shut, and you would catch a pig or 2. But pigs run in big groups. So if you have a group of 12 pigs come in, a sounder, and there's some bait in this trap, and 4 of them go in there, and then the door falls, and then those 4 pigs react and they make vocalizations, and they freak out a little bit. Then what you have now is 8 educated hogs. And we have seen you just don't really see these traps much anymore. They don't, because they kind of stopped working. Now you can go to a new population, you can go to a place that hasn't been trapped very much, but eventually, in my opinion, what's going to happen is they're going to become educated to that style of trap. And so we've seen that. That's, since, like, say 2006, when I really started to get into this, that trap was effective. It's 2024 now, and that trap, in my opinion, is not very effective anymore. So how many generations of hogs is that? It's several. And now the trapping systems have to be more technologically proficient. They have to be cell cameras that you can drop the gate by pushing the button on your phone. They have to be bigger, where you catch the whole sounder, which is the most important thing, is you don't leave any pig behind to be educated by that experience, because then that pig is somewhat likely to never enter into that stressful situation again. And then as it breeds new hogs, it's probably going to, through its behaviors, steer them away from those situations as well.
Yeah.
And then enter hunting, with rifles and stuff like that. So you can go to a ranch and maybe it's never been hunted. Let's say you go to a big ranch, it's never been hunted. Day 1, you might see hogs at noon. Oh, cool. This is going to be easy. Cool. First night you go out, you shoot a couple pigs. Let's fast forward to the end of that season. You and your friends have hunted this ranch pretty heavily, and you've taken a few hogs, but you notice that, like, by January, it's like, wow, they're not really coming out that much anymore, during the daylight hours. We know they're here. We see their tracks. They're still rooting up in these low
destroying
spots.
everything.
They're still destroying everything. We know they're still here. We see them on cameras or whatever it is, however you glean that information. Okay, let's fast forward to year 2. You're not going to see a hog at noon on year 2. I mean, unless you walk up on them sleeping. probably not going to be out. And then you're going to see, oh, the hunting is a little bit harder this year. It's good early, like if you started hunting in October, you kind of get the drop on them. They're a little surprised. They're like, oh, wait, this is happening again. And so then let's go to year 3, kind of the same thing. First couple hunts are successful, then it just progressively gets harder. And then by year 4 or 5, you're like, oh, there's still hogs here, but they've gotten a little hard. And then that point, like really the only way that you can effectively hunt them is at night. And kind of at the same time, concurrently, you've seen the technology kind of advance with things like thermals, and they are highly effective because at some point after sustained pressure, you have that seasonal pressure within a year, and then you have this like multi-year pressure, and you'll see there's just spikes and dips, and then it just gets harder and harder. But they got to come out and they got to feed, and then eventually your hog population will become pretty nocturnal because they realize that it's like that's the safest time, and it's also the most comfortable time for them if it's not super cold. In the spring, summer, fall here in Texas, hogs are just going to prefer to be nocturnal anyway. And so thermals and hunting at night has definitely become the most effective, and in some places the only way to get after them, unless you're hunting them from helicopters or something like that. So you will see this progression and how they've become, they've just wised up to it. So to loop back, why did we kill all 9 of them? Is because it will happen. I mean, they do learn lessons, and that's why they've been, I'll say it another time, they are very effective at surviving, and it's because they're so smart. And they're I would say that they're sinful, like they give in to a couple things. You can get in front of pigs, mostly because of their slothfulness and their greed. And that's food, they really like it a lot. I mean, they're pigs, they're metaphorically piggy. And so, that's one of the ways that you can very effectively get in front of them. And then also breeding cycles and things like that. But the things that's where they slip up, I guess, would be my point. So, but yeah, taking the entire sounders is important in doing so. If eradication is what you're after, if you would want to
protecting your
sustainably hunt
stock.
them. Yeah. I mean, if you want to hunt them and just have food, and you don't have to shoot them all. You just pick out the one you think is going to be the best, which is hard sometimes. But yeah, so that's a very long answer to that question.
Yeah, no. Oh my gosh. The one that you think is gonna be the best, do you think it's generally the large sow?
Yes.
So
Typically, or
fatty.
the largest sow that's pregnant, that's not doesn't have babies, because once the babies are on the ground, all of that fat and energy starts going to feed those babies. That is a very harsh approach for some people. They're like, wait, are you advocating killing pregnant sows? And I am absolutely advocating that. That's the situation we're in. I remember hearing a story one time of somebody hunting in California.
Sorry, there's an ant on my camera.
I saw that.
Did you see that? It goes.
I did.
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
And they
Hunting in California.
The host, the guide, I can't remember what it was, but basically the person in charge of the hunt was like, no, don't shoot that one. That's a pregnant sow. And I remember everybody, the group that heard that of Texans was like, wait, what? Like, why would you ever pass on any pig? Like, and I am very much guilty of that. Like, if I'm sitting there and a little pig runs out, I'll typically wait because I assume that a larger one's going to come out. But if a larger one does not come out, then I'm going to take that smaller one. Because I have a whole chapter dedicated to small pigs in the book, so I know what to do.
Do.
I was like, yeah. Do. So, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's harsh, but the big sow, the big pregnant sow, and you'll notice that there's a big pregnant sow, and then there's a sow that has babies with her, and it's like, well, is there any in between? And it's like, there might be an in between, but not often. It's like they're gonna be one or the other. There's a 23-day gap between them giving birth and then them re-entering
That's
the estrus
crazy.
cycle.
So they could give birth. They could have what are they? Are they litters?
Hmm.
Kits? Litters?
Litters.
They could have like what, 3 litters in a year? This 3 month, 3 week, 3 day thing is crazy to me. Like
It would be
you
a
said that
little
so
over.
nonchalant.
Yeah. Yeah. It would probably be about a 15-month cycle. And we're also speaking of like extremes, like if they were to be impregnated immediately. But if there is a
Healthy hog
healthy
population.
hog population out there, the likelihood that they are going to be bred is very high. And
Yeah.
they have no season for breeding, like deer and turkeys. They're breeding year round whenever it's appropriate. And so there's just
So
constantly
crazy.
litters hitting the ground. And once, a boar becomes sexually mature, he's out there roaming and looking, and they have that incredible sense of smell. And so they can pick up on a sow and estrus
Oh
like
my
that
gosh.
and be
Your
right there.
story of the mercy kill along the fence line
Mm,
of the private pig population was kind of comical. But I
mm,
just in the book, the one I'm about
mhm.
the hog that just would go look longingly over at
Yeah.
his private pigs. But
Yeah.
the I want to touch on this because like I didn't, as we already said, I didn't grow up hunting either, but I didn't grow up fishing, and I didn't grow up in a family that harvested their own meat at all. And I've been really blessed in the fact that food has always been something that my family holds dear. It is every evening we had sit down dinners. Dinner was made from scratch, and that's where we connected with each other. I have a family, my family was 6 people growing up, and it was a very important time of the day, and I'm very lucky for that. But also, I did grow up very sensitive to the hurting of animals. When I did start hunting, it was difficult for me, and it was probably even more difficult for my mother, who is one of my biggest, of course, probably my biggest supporter, but she did have a very, very hard time for a long time. She will eat the game I bring back, but I know that it is challenging. And understanding the connection to your food is really important, and what that brings to your family as a resource is really important. But like in this pig conversation, it's very different from that, because even like for me, the idea of shooting a baby pig is still so hard. The idea of shooting a pregnant pig is still so hard, just because of the whole, societal concept we have around young life and mother life and all of this. But the fact of the matter is that these pigs are highly invasive, and they're extremely detrimental to the local wildlife and the local ecosystem. Do you know how much damage, like monetarily, how much damage these pigs do every year?
I can't remember the numbers, but it's huge. It's in the, hundreds of millions just in Texas. I
Just in
mean,
Texas. That's
yeah.
crazy.
And to that point, it's like uh if you're not getting sad about it, you're doing it wrong. Like still, like so, not to be flippant about shooting that pregnant sow, but you can still regard that. You can still regard her and all those lives. You can
Yeah.
still think about it. But we're in a position where this is something that we need to do for the support of waterways, native species, all these other things. But I don't think that you have to approach that from just this completely blank emotional state at all. I think you can regard those lives, and you should.
Mm.
Every single pig, wants to be alive. It definitely does. And I think that every dove, you should think about like, oh, I wonder, was his first year. This is a 3-year-old dove. I mean, I wonder where he came from or she came from.
Yeah.
Was this a
What has
dove
she
from
seen?
Kansas, or was it a
Mhm.
local dove, or wow,
I always enjoy seeing what they've eaten and like, like kind of putting the
mhm.
story together. I mean, that kind of sounds kind of morbid, but like, yeah, I mean,
No, not at
having that
all.
relationship with that animal.
Absolutely. And it's interest, it's respect, but at the end of the day, the animal doesn't care if you're respecting it when you're eating it. It's like that deal's that's over.
Yeah.
But we've entered into this transaction, and if you choose to enter into the transaction with hogs, I think that do need to approach it, in my opinion, from somewhat of an eradication standpoint. But we don't treat deer like that at all. But it's
No.
very important to say that, like, okay, you would walk up to a big buck and be very reverential and be like, oh, this thing was beautiful and so forth. It's like, but since we've been given license to kill all the pigs, that doesn't give us license to hate them and mock them or shoot them in the guts so that they run off and
Oh,
die in a convenient place, things like that. I don't think
yeah.
that that's the same. I think that, you can still that treat that pig the same way as you do that big buck. I mean, why not? I
Still
mean,
alive.
it's
Hmm.
still alive, but
And still food on the table if you choose.
yeah, and we're still going to take that. I think that's the last line in the hog book. It's like, and I was, I love feral pigs, but I will still shoot everyone that I see.
Yeah.
And
That's,
but it doesn't mean that we don't respect them,
yeah.
you
There's so
but
much dynamic to that
sorry.
relationship. And I think
Yeah.
that that's really important to outline. And you did a really great job explaining that, because yes, we still respect these animals, we still respect the lives we take, and it could not be more obvious in your book that you created specifically about how to respect this animal to its fullest by doing all these amazing meals, and how to like process this animal so that it can you can really fully utilize all the meat that it can potentially provide you and your family
Hmm.
with. um I'd love to hear just like a little bit, like I'd love for you to give our listeners a little teaser into like the care of these pigs. Like there's a lot of mindset around how the pigs are dirty, don't touch them, don't eat them, you have to soak them in water. I know a lot of people that put their animals in water. Now I'm like fish care, like I'm like, don't let the meat touch water. And I've kind of just taken that from there to my other harvest, just because you'll see it like absorbs it gets soggy.
Hmm.
No. So I'd love to hear, some of your like care tips on when you're butchering or cleaning when you're cleaning the pig, from there to, the like post harvest care.
Yeah, and I think that those things that you just touched on are really important, in that we have a supposition, a mindset around pigs or wild game in general, that it's at best unknown and at worst it's dirty because it came from somewhere that we have no control over. And so when we try to absorb that, or try to figure out how to take that from that environment and put that into the comfortable environment of it being our food, there's a lot of different transitions that it can take in our minds, and we can approach that very emotionally, like, oh, we got to clean this. And then again, at best we're going to soak it in water, at worst we're going to soak it in bleach water, which I've also heard of.
Mm.
These people like, and to me, I'm like, oh, well, you would rather consume bleach than what you think is on this pig. And don't get me wrong, pigs are dirty. I mean, they're a metaphor for it,
Ugh.
and on the outside. But we
Mm-hmm.
eat a lot of pork. We eat
Mm-hmm.
a lot of domestic pork. Big boars can be very stinky and very dirty. Maybe they just wallowed in mud. And man, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes you walk up on one of these big stinky boars and he's just totally covered in mud, and I'm just like, why did I have to shoot that one? Like,
I don't want to deal with it.
and they're almost always like the ones on the periphery of the group. And so if it's at night or it's like low light, you're like, oh, that one. And it's just like 9 times out of 10, I walk up, I'm like, how does this always happen? It's just like this one. It's like, why couldn't this have been the big sow? It's like, but it's another big boar, and they tend to move around a lot more. So I mean, I feel like those if you're out hunting, you're statistically more likely to see one of them. And how do we take that animal and make it palatable? Or how do we feel comfortable about it? And so people have developed a lot of approaches to that, and I think that in those approaches we've gone wrong, and then that hasn't served us very well in the kitchen, and that's just engendered more of this misconception of them as a food source, is because
Yeah.
we've mistreated them after the shot, and then we blame them for the outcome. And it's very similar to fish. You can, if
Mm,
you immediately bleed an oily fish, and then I like to put them in like an ice slurry and bleed
me
out, and
too.
then when you fillet them, you keep everything dry and
Mm,
beautiful, and you will have a exemplary experience with that fish. It'll taste like no fish you've ever had.
yeah.
And the same thing can go for a hog, in that how do you treat it afterwards? And I had this conversation with a couple people last night, and it's just like, and I try to distill it down to two words, and those words are cold and dry,
Mm,
cold and dry, cold and dry. And how you achieve cold and dry is kind of up to you. I'm here to help and offer some suggestions, but each situation is going to be unique. If you're in uh, Oklahoma in January and it's cold and you just shot a pig, it's a way different story than if you're in South Texas in July and you just
yeah.
shot a pig. How do
Very
you get
different.
it cold?
Mm,
There's a lot of ways. And then, like, well, we pour ice all over it. And then I'll be like, well, now is it dry? No, it's not dry anymore. So now you got to keep that ice from touching it, but you got to get it cold. And so there's going to be some trade offs. There's going to be sometimes where it's maybe not as cold as it needs to be or as dry as it needs to be. But if you just keep that as your focus, like just keep driving towards cold and dry, you'll get there. A walk-in cooler is the best, but
oh,
not everybody has a
ideal.
walk-in. Like you,
Unfortunately, not
you,
always. We don't have
yeah,
those every time.
you skin it and you gut it and you hang it in a nice breezy walk-in. Second best is a cold night. And like I said, it depends on weather, depends on where you're at. Hanging it up at night, if it's 40 degrees outside, hell, even if it's 50 degrees and you've got it skinned and gutted and it's breezy and somewhat dry, I think it's going to be fine. But then there's so many situations that are going to happen after that where that's not tenable. And so you're going to have to cool it down some other way. Currently, my favorite way is, and this is kind of something I developed after the hog book, is Yeti has excellent product in these ice packs, these Yeti ice packs.
Mm.
They are very cold. They are colder than ice. In fact, if you put things next to them, sometimes they will freeze those things.
Oh,
Whereas
wow.
ice would never do that. So they're very cold, and they're obviously very dry because they're an ice pack. And so I have about a dozen of those, and I've actually had my best experiences using those to keep things exceedingly cold and then also dry in a cooler. Next best would be to try to recreate that somehow. Maybe that's a jug or frozen, something that you can contain. And then after that, it's to sequester that ice with something. And that's going to be a food grade bag. Contractor bags will work, microplastics, scents, other things like that. Just the plastic in general, not optimal, but in my mind, in my opinion, better than soaking it in ice and water. And remember that
Yeah.
ice is not some kind of pure ice off of a glacier. That is water out of a convenience store tap.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
like
In
it's
South
it's
Texas.
chlorinated, rusty water that
Mm.
essentially you're making a marinade or brine out of that water if you're applying that directly to an animal. So think about it that way. Any way that you can keep that water, that ice off of them. So I like to pack a cooler with about a third deep ice, put the animal where the cavity is facing down so water won't pool in it, bag that animal in food grade bags. And you can go online and find big food grade bags.
Oh,
They're
interesting.
they're not super cheap, but how many are
Yeah.
you going to use?
Right.
Half a dozen a year. And so those would work really well. And then ice the top of it and then open the drain plug. And you're going to get condensation. It's going to get a little bit wet, but it'd be distinctly different than if you had just put that directly on ice. And
Yeah.
this is an ongoing battle that I have. Everybody
Every single time.
ices. And what I find to be really interesting is the verb that they use is they say, I'm going to put this deer in my cooler, or I'm going to put this hog in my cooler and I'm going to bleed it out. And it's like, no, no. In fact, the word you just used is wholly inappropriate because that's not even blood. that's myoglobin. The blood left, with a 30-06 hole, most of
Mm-hmm.
it, like granted, there's some blood involved, but you're not bleeding this animal like you would bleed a wahoo or a lamb that was killed in a slaughterhouse or something like that. That is not the process that's happening right now. You're just removing moisture from these muscles and oftentimes replacing that moisture with this convenience store water. It's a vector for bacteria, which is therefore, where you introduce gamey flavors and so forth. So,
That's interesting.
at the very root of it, when somebody says I put it in a cooler and I bled it, I was like, that's just not even what happened. You did not bleed it. It's not blood. And if it's not blood, then you cannot bleed it. So, but it's hard because in a hot environment like Texas, it's the most logical way to cool something down. Oh, we have a 12 pack of beer. What do we got to get it cold? Put it on ice. It's just like, of course, it makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But it's not the best. And I always try to tell people, it's like, would you take a prime ribeye you just bought at the store, take it out to your cooler and just stick it in ice? And they're like, no, why not? Well, it get kind of gray and mushy looking, and then when you throw it on the grill, it's just kind of steam. I'm like, no way. Really?
What an interesting concept.
Yeah, I've dealt with
people, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that in the fishing industry, like I see a lot of professional crews that'll fillet tuna loins, like big loins, and stick them directly on ice. And I'm just like, oh no, don't do that. Don't do that. It's the same thing. Yeah. And it gets all grainy and soggy, and no, it's bad.
We fished with a guy the other day, and he did a beautiful job of filleting, one of the best I've ever seen. When I love watching guys, because I don't like to get in there and step on toes. I'm just always like, no, you do that. But I love to watch, and sometimes you're like, wow, that's cool, and sometimes you're like, oh, cringe. Man. And this guy did a beautiful job on them, and then immediately took them and stuck them in a bucket of water. But they were in there just but the fillets, and then he pulled them out and drained them off really well, and they were fine. It was beautiful. But there's everybody has their own process, and he probably wanted to get the scales off, but it was also one of the most meticulous filleting jobs I have ever seen. And I was like, I got some of the fillets out a couple of days ago, and I was looking at it. I was like, this is really spectacular work.
That's
here.
Cool. What kind of fish?
These were trout, reds, and black drum.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yum.
Yum.
I wanted to ask, so coming in out of this wet, like dry and cold conversation, what about brining these pigs, and how is it different?
Yeah, definitely. So that's a question that comes up a lot, because I'm like, oh, you want to put them in a brine? And like, what's a brine? And it's like, oh, it's water. But you just, I think there's a big difference. So we're talking about the initial 24 hours of rigor mortis and the initial cooling down of that cut, or of that whole animal. We need to get it cooled down, just for all kinds of safety purposes. A brine is something that you're going to introduce later on in a very controlled environment. Not every cut would be brined. And it's going to be very specific, and it's going to be done for a certain amount of time. And then most importantly, it has salt in it. So there's a different reaction that's happening in there. It's reverse osmosis. You are intentionally replacing the moisture that's within those mussels with moisture in the form of water, but that water has been seasoned with bay leaves and star anise and sugar and salt. And so you're adding that in there. And so, yes, it will affect the texture of the cut a little bit. But it also improves so many things in cooking, like flavor, the exterior char, moisture, things like that. So it's very different. And I mean, I would say that the basic difference in there is the inclusion of salt, and from just icing meat. So it is different. And it takes place later on. You want to get that animal through the first 24 hours of rigor mortis, and preferably longer than that. If specifically to hogs, I'd say like 5, 6, 7, 8 days of chilling is going to be optimal, and you'll just see the meat improve. Venison can go way longer than that in the right and
Mm,
dry and cold environment. I mean,
yum.
months, actually. I mean, dry aging venison is actually quite beautiful. I have not had much luck dry aging hogs. They
That's
just
interesting.
tend to develop more of a sourness, and I think the fat starts to rancidify more. The fat on a hog is more valuable. You tend to leave it all on there, whereas venison fat, you tend to take almost all of it off because it tends to be so waxy.
Mm,
But that fat will rancidify, and the flavor in hogs that have been aged, it's not as good.
yeah.
And I mean, when I say aged, sometimes it's been unintentional. Maybe we brought in some hogs for a class, and since they're wild animals, you can't exactly just order them, say like,
Right.
hey, I need them on this day. Sometimes you have to take what you can get, and maybe they hung in a cooler for 20 days. And I have seen that, and it's been like, whoa, these are starting to get a little funk on them, but they were still pretty good, but exceptionally tender. I will say that. But
Oh,
you
that's
know,
cool.
I think the window on hogs is it's 5 to 8 days, but whenever convenient, really, for you. But that's the difference between the initial cooling down and then when you would apply a brine is after.
That's awesome information. And you guys, the brine recipe is in the hog book. Definitely check that out. Jesse, what about potential diseases with wild game, particularly hogs?
Yeah. In dealing with digestive and reproductive organs, so the skinning and gutting process, I wear gloves. And I made a point of showing gloves in the book. The photographer hated it. He's like, they look terrible. Can you just take them off and then say to wear gloves? And I was like, no, you have to show by example. And also, I actually do want to protect my hands during this photo shoot.
Believe it or
Um,
not, these are here
yeah,
for a reason.
yeah, rare, but that's when, in my understanding, that is when you're really going to encounter any issues, and a cut on your hand or that exposure during that process. Once the meat is on the table and chilled down, I don't wear gloves anymore. So 5 to 8 days later, when I start butchering the hog, cutting it into pieces, uh, that I don't wear gloves for that. But yeah, reproductive and digestive organs, I'm very careful about it. And then if we're doing a class, I make everybody wear gloves too. It's like
Mhm.
it's the rule. And all the guides, everybody, like, just glove up. Deer, optional. I like to wear gloves just because I feel like I can keep my hands cleaner. I just prefer it. Um,
Fair.
but I don't think it's as
But it's
necessary.
not as important with deer as it is with hogs. Why is that?
They're not typically carrying as many diseases. So hogs can carry trichinosis, brucellosis, pseudorabies, tularemia, all of these things. If you can avoid that during the processing by wearing gloves, that's your first barrier. And then the second would be in cooking and or freezing. So if you freeze the meat for an extended amount of time, most of those issues will be overcome. You don't really need to worry about it. And if you employ cooking to a high temperature after that, then you really have nothing to worry about. So, once you get into like 165, everything is going to get nuked.
Right.
It's going to be fine. So, any slow cooking process you're going to be fine. It's the chops and tenderloins and things like
Yeah.
that where you don't really want to take them to 165 is where you can take on some risk. I've been very, I don't know, I don't want to say I've been very lucky, but I have definitely eaten lots and lots of medium well barrel hog that hasn't been frozen,
That
and
has not been frozen.
has not been frozen.
Okay.
Yeah. If you wanted to be extremely safe about it, I would say definitely freeze that. And then if you want to take it, up to 165, it's going to be technically overcooked, but you can
Oof.
feel very safe about that.
Right.
So yeah, I think that you are entering into some risk. I mean, I definitely keep my eye on any uh, swine-based infections that have happened, and I just nothing really comes down the pipeline. You'll see every once in a while. The last case I heard of was an older man, immunocompromised, um, processed a bunch of hogs, no gloves,
Hmm.
and contracted brucellosis during that process via cuts in his hand.
Ah,
So, I
bummer.
mean, you see that, but that's, almost a perfect storm right there. And it was probably hot. All
Hmm.
kinds of things added up to that. I don't know of any trichinosis cases in Texas from feral hogs. And from what I understand, most trichinosis infections happen from bear, and also from
Okay.
walrus, from eating walrus. So probably indigenous consumption of walrus, and then people just mishandling bear. I mean, there's some famous bear trichinosis stories out there. There's a certain famous film crew that all got it. The whole meat eater crew got trichinosis from eating undercooked bear in one meal,
Oh my
and you
gosh.
live with that forever. You know,
Yeah.
But, as an advocate of eating feral hogs, I don't mean to sound flippant or anything about it. I mean, like, definitely these safety steps can be taken, and to your comfort level, take them.
Yeah.
Like, definitely glove up, freeze, and cook to a high temperature if you're feeling like you need to do that. I don't
How
want to encourage anybody to do otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. How long do you think that, because I love my pork medium rare
Mm.
on a pork chop. Oh, so good, tenderloin. But how long do you recommend that you freeze them for?
I believe USDA says 21 days.
Okay.
I'm going to throw some numbers out there. Just everybody out there, Google it. I'm going to
Yeah,
throw some
Google
numbers
it.
out that I don't remember, but I want to say it's like -7 for 21 days. I don't quite remember right now, but it's it's a freezer temperature for a couple weeks.
Yeah. And that's
Should do.
USDA, so you're going to be
That's going to be like really
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 strict.
strict. Yeah, that'll
Yeah,
that'll do it. And then
that's cool.
once 165. I mean, but interestingly though, like if you were sous videing something at in the 130s, you're still going to render those trichinae larvae inert because the amount of time that it stays at that lower temperature. If you take it to 130 for a few seconds, it won't kill it. But if you take it to 130 for an hour, it will.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's a lot of it is when you come to temperature, it's a lot of it is about time. And so at like 165, it dies in a second.
Hmm.
At 130, it dies in an hour. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
there's also a lot of curve to it that way. And so it's kind of hard to define. But, if you're, at all concerned, they slow cook beautifully. And so you can take them to 200 degrees for 4 hours
It's
and be
so
sure
good.
of it, and then it's just shredding, and so it's all good, so you don't have
Man,
to worry about
y'all need to check out this hog book because if you're not hungry, you're crazy. I'm starving now. But
it. Even though we're
there's
talking about trichinosis, that's
even though that's when you
the
know you like
current
food.
current topic. Yeah. All right.
I'm so hungry. There's so many different types of recipes in there of different, we're going to tie this up. I don't want to take any more of your time, but you mentioned in the beginning of the talk the melting pot that is the food culture of Texas. And what I really like in the hog book is that you've just got such a wide array of recipes available for the consumer in all sorts of different ways, whether it be sausage from the big boars or slow cooked shredded pork or Milanese or whatever it might be. It's seriously like so many cool options. What's your favorite recipe in the hog book? I know you.
Mm,
I know that's not fair.
I'll pull out like three current
Okay.
favorites. I love the paprikash, which is this slow cooked pork. It's just cooked till it's like almost gonna fall apart. It's got lots and lots of paprika, which I find to be inspiring because I'm obsessed with paprika. And I think that most people think of it as kind of a throwaway ingredient. We make our own paprika at the
Oh, that's
restaurant.
cool.
And so we buy hundreds of pounds of beautiful Hungarian peppers every year, and then we smoke them over oak, and then we dry them. They have
Yum.
precisely one ingredient, two if you count smoke, but it is the only ingredient in there is this beautiful thick-walled sweet pepper, and then it produces this. I mean, the paprika when it's freshly ground is like one of the most beautiful smells you've ever smelled. It's like chocolatey and coffee and smoky and spicy. It's
Bucket
very,
list. New item on the
yeah,
bucket list.
it's so cool. And the paprikash, is a Hungarian preparation of that, where you bring those two things together. So it's just a lot of paprika and this fatty wild boar, onions. There's some other components in there, but really those are the two things. I love that. It's a very good wintry stew. And then one of the sausages I find I love it. It's the Filipino longanisa. And so it's a
Oh, I
very
haven't tried it.
sweet sausage. It has, I think, like a cup and a half of sugar per 5 pounds, which is a
Oh my
lot.
gosh.
It's spicy.
Maybe that's why I haven't tried it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really good. It's got a
Bet.
ton of garlic. So it's very assertive. It's got everything, it's salted, it's got spice, it's got garlic, it's got sweetness to it, and then it's smoked. And so basically you're looking at all the components that make bacon good, a little bit of spice, some smoke, some salt, some sweetness, and some fat. I like that sausage because you can just grill it and serve it as is, with some eggs or some rice or whatever. But I particularly love it because it plays so nicely with seafood. I'm One of my favorite things in the world is blue crab. I
Oh,
love
seriously though.
crabbing, and I love eating I'm having blue crabs
So
for
good.
dinner tonight. So
Oh, nice.
which is a total treat for us, because the only way we get it is like I got to go down the coast and run traps and hopefully catch some crabs, which we did. And this is
Congratulations.
the last. Oh, I know, I'm so happy. It's like the last of it. This is the last night. We got to think 4 meals out of them. And it's like
That's
almost
amazing.
every night. It's
Yeah.
like we're just gonna eat them until they're gone.
Ah,
But like a crab boil, if you're gonna put sausage in a seafood boil, this to me is the best one. Like it's
that's
like,
awesome.
no offense to Louisiana and your delicious andouille, but
Very
I'm
good.
just saying this one's way better. So
Man.
a crawfish boil, a crab boil, shrimp boil, any kind of seafood boil, if you're going to integrate sausage in there, a little wild boar Filipino longanisa, in my humble opinion, is the best. Like it just adds just such a counterpoint to that seafood. And so so that's two recipes that I love out of there. And then any of the cutlets, any of the pan fried cutlets are always good, like
Pan fried cutlets are hard to beat.
Parmesan. Yeah, they are. I mean, but I would actually give the edge in that department to turkey. I really love turkey breast pounded out and lightly breaded and then pan fried, and then whatever you're going to do with that, arugula and Parmesan and lemon or
Stop.
whatever. Sorry. You asked.
Don't stop.
Brought this upon yourself.
I'm going to drive up to Austin and hang out with you, Jesse. I'm ready. You guys said blue crab. We set our traps a few weeks ago and we were unlucky. And I was like, dang it. Like, we need to go out and do it again, because blue crab is a fan favorite in this household for sure.
I love it.
They're difficult to eat, so I think it like deters a lot of people. But man, more for me. That like swimmer lollipop you can get if you
I know
like,
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that's
so
that's the
good.
jumbo lump on that last.
And every
swimmer
time you're like around the table and you do it, you're like, check this one out. Like I take the win for the day. Man, that's awesome. And your turkey book is relatively new. When did it come out?
Came out in March, and
Okay.
I think there's a lot of it's so different from the hog book. There's photos in the hog book that were taken 11 years before we released the hog book, and there's content that we were putting in there that we had started on a full 11 years before it was released.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. The turkey book, however, is such a different book. I kind of I was thinking about this. I think it was yesterday. I wrote the hog book for everybody, and I wrote the turkey book for me, uh, because I love hunting turkeys and I love eating them. But I mean, I really love turkey hunting. Like this, my spring is just like, don't even try. I'm gone. I mean, like March through late May, I'm out.
That's so
That's
cool.
what I want to be doing at the most beautiful time of year. We
I've
turn the
never done
turkey.
that.
Oh well, the just give it one shot and you're done. You're done. It is. It's, I won't go into it in depth here, the why, but it is. It's just kind of it's an incredible experience, even if you don't get one, especially if you don't get one, and that doesn't quite make any sense, but you'll understand.
I
Um,
I get it. I've been unsuccessful at hunts before, definitely many times. So, I mean, I'd love to try the spring turkey hunt one day. It's definitely on my list. That's so cool.
yeah.
Please continue. Yes.
Well, we turned that book around in something like 14 months. In that we started
Wow.
shooting recipes, and then the entire book is based on one season. It's 4 hunts in one season. So Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Connecticut. And
Wow.
it's a journal, so it's so different from the hog book. Even the stylistically, it's the way it's set up. It's not a textbook. It's more. It's a journal. It's basically mid March through mid May of 2023. This is what I did, and these are the people I did with. They're chefs or hunters that like to cook, and then here's all the recipes that we literally cooked
Oh,
during
that's
the
so
turkey
cool.
hunts and between the turkey hunts, and just kind of explored it in a very small slice of time. And so it's a very different approach to it. And I was like, my intention was to make a much smaller book than the hog book, which is a kind of massive. It's
It's a
420
big book.
pages long, and the turkey book came in at almost 390 pages.
Yeah,
So
I was
it's
about to
I didn't
say, it
even
sure looks the same size to me.
I didn't succeed in that, but
What?
it was a lot of fun, and it's such a different topic too. From this invasive species that we need to eradicate
Yeah.
to the species that we can responsibly enjoy as a resource, and kind of how just like coming along with me while I was exploring that for myself. And I've only been, I think, really into turkey hunting for maybe 4 or 5 years. And so very much a novice. I mean, you could go a
Yeah, that's so
lifetime.
cool.
It's not like anything else. I think you could really apply yourself throughout your whole life and still at the end be like, I'm just still a mediocre turkey hunter. I don't know how that happened. It happened because they're just so crafty. It's
Oh,
they're
that's cool.
some days it's easy, some days it's hard, but the thing is you're out in the spring and you're having these incredible interactions with this magnificent wild animal. And sometimes you get to watch the hens, or you get to watch gobblers fight, or you don't hear one for 3 days, or this or that. It's just like, it's all really cool, and all the experiences that happen around that, the birds and the plant life and everything that's just exploding in the spring, and you're out there for that. And it's great. And then when it comes to food, I think there is no finer wild game than wild turkey. It's just so good, and it's a big animal. It's very giving.
That is a big statement.
I know, I know. I I
That
love it.
is I that is so cool, Jesse. Like, I am a little blown away that you just said that. So hold whole new respect for the turkey.
Yeah,
Really
it's
excited to dive into
delicious.
that.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay, cool. Wow. I harvested a turkey once, and with a rifle on a
Hmm.
feeder,
Hmm.
and a friend's property, and we tried to, cook it whole. And I think
Mm.
Drake actually fried it, and it was
Oh,
good. But
well,
like,
tough.
now I know better based on your books. But I'm really excited to check out the turkey book specifically. Just like following that journey is very enticing, especially as somebody that's never done that before. Like, I just think the storytelling in your books, you just have such a unique viewpoint of the world that I think is so fundamental, and also just so respectful, and your passion is so clear and evidence through all of the work that you do that it's like captivating. And it's really impressive stuff. And I'm excited to check the turkey book out too, because you just said that it's the best game out there.
I think so. Well, I'm also trying to sell turkey books right now, so
yeah, you're doing a great job. Sold.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
so
thank you.
cool.
That's very kind. Like, and to hear that, I mean, the reasons, it's great to hear when that's exactly why you do the things, why I do the things that I do. It's like I love the education part of it, and to hear people get fired up about those things was my intention from the beginning. So it's very, very nice to hear those words, and you're very kind to share that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I mean, 100% totally mean it. What you've provided our community with is exceptional. And I definitely highly recommend it to any hunter that's out there, anyone that's even interested in hunting. I have 2 hog books. I have one in my office behind me over there, and one downstairs in the kitchen. So
Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan. But Jesse, I've taken up enough of your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. And do you have any exciting things coming up that you want to share with us, or are you good?
I'm definitely not working on a project right now. A lot of people ask, what's next? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like exciting. I'm trying to get down to the coast a lot and just kind of reacquaint myself with all those blue crabs and redfish. And, these days it's just spending some time at the restaurant. And my daughter is now at an age where she's just becoming a really effective hunter. And I think that
That's awesome.
you get to a point in life where it's like, you know what, I don't even want to shoot deer this year. I just want her to do that, or I'm just let her do that. And so, like, being at a really wonderful spot to be able to refocus on something like that, where it's like, now I think about it through a completely different perspective. And that is, how do I empower her to, go and do these things and try to make it as seamless and as good as possible. And so
Oh my gosh,
it's
how
a
cool.
whole new world. It's like, after you have that personal excitement about hunting when you first enter into it, and then you get to do it all over again, which is
How old is she?
she's 13.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. That
Yeah.
is so cool. I'm very excited for you both. That is special.
Yeah.
An efficient hunter. I like that. Well, you guys are always welcome to join us over here at the coast. We could go set some crab traps and look for flounder or redfish or
Oof,
whatever you
oof.
want.
Oh, speaking my language, I have a ton of crab traps. I have more crab traps than I can legally put out, which doesn't make any sense. And to be very clear, in case Texas Parks and Wildlife is listening, I don't put them all out. I just own more than I can put out at one time, which makes no sense at all. But it's like, yeah, I love my blue crabs. So
That's awesome. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much, Jesse. I really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.